This is the story of Emily Peterson. Emily met her husband while she was living in New York City. They both attended an event for people of like minds to mingle and connect. Mikey was charming, and his words resonated with her. In a room full of people, his personality stood out. He was surrounded by people wanting to talk with him, but once he locked eyes with Emily, he only wanted to talk to her. That night, they went for coffee and kept their conversation going. His philosophy on reincarnation and mortal beings kept her glued to his words. The next day, they met up after work. He delved into her soul. He wanted to know everything about her past and what kind of future she wanted in this lifetime. When Emily introduced Mikey to her family, they were very vocal with their concerns. He seemed out of touch with reality and was bringing her down with him. She was once so close to her family and down to earth, but after moving to the city, she became a different person. She was once best friends with her siblings, but now she couldn't stand being in the same room with them. She continued to distance herself from her family and would discuss her life as though she was watching it from the outside. They wanted to get her help, but they weren't sure where to start. When she called 4 months later with the news of her marriage to Mikey, her parents felt a river of emotions. Shock, upset, anger, heartbreak, and just a brief moment of joy, because she felt secure with someone who understood her quirks. Mikey's role in the group where they had met climbed from new member to philosophic leader fast. He kept up the charisma, and his words would draw new members in. Quarterly meetings turned to monthly meetings turned to weekly meetings, and weekly meetings turned into daily calls with multiple members to help guide them in their mortal journeys. Emily was so proud to be Mikey's wife in this lifetime. When he began charging members to attend meetings and call him for guidance, she managed the finances, and they were living a comfortable life. Their apartment was full of plants and sunshine. It felt like their own oasis in the crazy city. But one day, Mikey told Emily they needed to move away from the city to a town upstate called Chatham. He said they needed to be connected to nature, and their apartment was trapping them from getting closer to Mother Earth. He bought them a home and built a homestead with animals and vegetable gardens. At first, it was nice and peaceful, but Emily quickly became lonely. She was so used to being surrounded by people that the silence was beginning to get to her. She wanted to move back to the city. Not only was she missing their community, but Mikey had stopped hosting meetings and answering calls from his followers. Their money was quickly depleting, and Emily started coming out of the haze. She told Mikey this wasn't a sustainable way to live, and she was planning to call her parents and head back home to them. From there, they could discuss what would happen with their marriage. Mikey was devastated that Emily wanted to leave him and angry at her love for money, since they would have to start over in their next lives anyway. He convinced her to stay one last night and see if it would change her mind to breathe in the fresh air and think about her decisions. She stayed and never made the call to her family. Mikey was grateful to have his wife continue as his partner in this lifetime. Mikey took over the tasks of tending to the animals and keeping up with the garden. He let her relax and hoped that with less work on her plate, she could enjoy the beauties of living in their quiet town. Things seemed to be okay from Mikey's point of view. Then one day, he received a letter from a former follower, Gus, that said their new leader was nothing like him, and he needed to speak with Mikey in person to seek some guidance. Mikey called him and invited him to their home since his message seemed urgent. Gus arrived the next day after a long trip from the city. The outside of their home was enchanting with all of the plants and farmland. He felt a sense of peace just being closer to Mikey again. Mikey opened the door and let Gus in. He was looking forward to helping someone heal once again. Gus's face went from joy to disgust. "What is that smell?" "Probably the animals," said Mikey. "The smell can be overwhelming at first." Gus nodded his head but was slightly confused because it didn't smell this bad outside, where the animals actually lived. Mikey brought him to their kitchen and got Gus a cup of tea. He started asking questions about what had been going on and why he was seeking guidance. They continued their conversation and made their way to the sitting room, where Emily was seated under a fluffy blanket. Oh my God. Gus looked terrified. Why does Emily look dead? She's dead. Why is Emily dead? She's not dead, Mikey replied. She was released from her mortal form. She's dead. Gus exclaimed, How are you living with your dead wife's body? What happened? Again, Mikey said, She is not dead. She needed to be released from her mortal form. She was suffering. She was unhappy being here away from the city. I released her so she could move on to her next life. She wouldn't need her mortal form, so I keep it here with me. Gus tried to remain calm since he wasn't sure how quickly Mikey could be set off. Mikey tried to have a long discussion about the new leader and what changes Gus was going through. Gus was willing to speak for a moment, but then he suddenly claimed he was tired and needed to leave because of the long trip. Mikey offered for him to stay with them, or at least stay in a tent on their property to feel connected to nature and relax a little. Gus was worried about insulting him, so he said yes and quietly laid in his tent until he was sure Mikey was asleep. Then he called the police. A barrage of troopers stormed the property. They captured Mikey and escorted Emily's body off the property with the coroner. Mikey had no remorse for his actions. He said the night Emily tried to leave, he smothered her in her sleep. She wasn't behaving like herself, and he wanted to release her into her next life so she could reset herself. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, and even behind bars, he is refusing to acknowledge that what he did was considered murder and not rebirth. Mikey started a group in the prison and has weekly meetings with willing inmates who want to learn all about their spirits living multiple lives.